I just got back from going on my dream vacation to Japan. For the most part, it was awesome, and everything went off without a hitch. My flights were on time, the language barrier wasn't too bad. It was fairly easy getting around. I got to see most of the stuff on my itinerary. The food was delicious. There was only one sore spot that really stands out, and that's the night I stayed at a capsule hotel. I was supposed to stay there 3 nights, but after the first, I ended up using my emergency funds to pay for a hotel the next 2 nights. I think you'll understand why after you read this. I want to start off by stressing just how damn exhausted I was. This was at the tail end of a 2-week trip, where I hadn't taken a single day off, so to speak. We're talking 8 to 10 hours of walking every day, exploring the cities, going to shrines, shopping, and all that other good stuff. I'd started the day bright and early in Osaka, soaking up every bit of the city I could, knowing it might be the last time I got to see it. I took an evening train to Tokyo, which took about 3.5 hours. From there, I headed to Akihabara and explored, dragging my luggage behind me. I could have left it in a locker at the train station, but that meant doubling back and grabbing it, and I didn't want to subject my feet to that. I'd decided on a chilly evening. I ended up being so enthralled that I didn't get to the capsule hotel until a bit past midnight. So yeah, I felt like I could have slept through a hurricane. I checked in, got a neat little bracelet with my capsule number, as well as a key to a small locker for my stuff. I somehow managed to wedge my oversized luggage in there. I took a shower and then headed to my capsule for sweet sleep. If you've never heard of capsule hotels, just imagine a morgue, except instead of a wall of tiny human freezers, it's full of neat, slightly larger sleeping areas tall enough to sit up and use a laptop, and long enough to sleep in, but not much else. As I crawled into capsule 616, I noticed a little light indicator come on outside the capsule to indicate it was occupied. Sweet, I pulled the door down, played with every single knob on the wall just because I could, and once I figured out how to turn the lights off, my head hit the pillow, and it was off to dreamland. For about 10 minutes, it wasn't long before I started hearing a voice through the walls. I guessed they were thinner than they looked, and that my sleep hadn't plunged into deep enough territory for me to stay unconscious despite the mental and physical exhaustion. I tried to fall back asleep, but the voice kept me up. It was constant, and I mean seriously, nonstop. I don't think she ever took the time to breathe. Imagine that one Eminem song, you know the one, right? It was like that, except it went on for easily half an hour. Because the sound was muffled and because every syllable melded into the next, I couldn't make out what language she was speaking. I don't think it was Japanese. I don't know. I'm not a linguistic expert. But there weren't a lot of that sound you hear so often in Japanese, and she was hitting those R's pretty hard. So if I had to guess, I think it might have been German. Whatever language it was freaking me out. That's when I remembered the buttons on the wall. I pawed around until I turned the lights on, and then found the knob for the white noise. Bless you, Japan, for your practical technology. My little capsule was soon filled with the sound of rain and thunder easily overpowering the voice from my neighbor's capsule. I could still hear her, sure, but she was a whisper in a typhoon. I dimmed the lights, closed my eyes. All was right with the world. For, you guessed it, about 10 minutes, intermixed with the synthetic storm was the wailing of a tornado siren. It took me a long time to realize it wasn't meant to be there, and that it was coming from my neighbor Dot at this point. It was about 2 in the morning. I was tired, I was cranky, I just wanted a few hours of sleep before another fun-filled day of adventure. I was internally cursing at whatever inconsiderate fucking tourist starts screaming in their goddamn capsule in the middle of the goddamn night, knowing full well everyone could hear her. In my frustration, I made my one big mistake. I slammed my fist into the wall and screamed, "Shut the fuck up." This was her invitation to start slamming back, and boy did she take it and run with it. Screaming, she hit the wall so hard I swear to God it felt like my entire capsule was shaking. It was like she was full-on body slamming it with all her might, all while screaming so loud I could barely hear the storm anymore. I put my hand on the wall and I felt it buckle as she thrashed against it. I backed away into the opposite wall, but I could still feel every slam as though it was coming from the capsule to my left instead of my right. I'd had enough. I was going to go see if the concierge was still awake and see what they could do about putting me on another floor or kicking this jerk out. I opened my capsule door and jumped onto solid ground. The little occupied light at the foot of my capsule turned off after a few seconds. The noise stopped. The banging ceased, and my breath caught in my throat. I looked at the light indicator under my neighbor's capsule. It was turned off. I could feel cold sweat pouring out of me. Just a broken light. Right, that's what I hoped. But I guess I've read one too many horror stories, because something compelled me to grab her door handle and slowly lift it. Yeah, the neighbor's capsule was empty. I spent the night on a bench in the locker room. I know I probably should have left entirely, but I was spent. The next morning, stiff and barely rested, I went down to the lobby and tried to explain what happened in my pitiful, broken-ass Japanese. The concierge looked confused, and even after using a translation service, I didn't get anywhere until she saw my bracelet with the room number. There was the slightest micro-expression of horror on her face. She pulled my arm towards her, gently took the bracelet off, and flipped it around. I was supposed to be in capsule 919, not 616. That look on her face, though, I can still picture it in my mind's eye. I have a feeling it wasn't just a look of, "Oh dear, you were in the wrong capsule." I think she knew damn well what was going on. So yeah, I went to a hotel the next night. If you ever go to the Niagara Falls U Hotel, don't stay in room 5849. They'll tell you it's safe. They might say it's the only room available. Don't listen. Go to another hotel if you have to, but don't go in that room. My girlfriend and I decided to visit Niagara Falls as a Valentine's Day weekend away. I booked it all a few weeks in advance, and we were both eagerly awaiting the trip as the days counted down towards the 17th, the weekend after Valentine's Day. When we got there, they told us they were overbooked, and the person at the check-in desk appeared slightly anxious. She told us that we were being upgraded at no extra charge. You'll be staying in a suite with a view of the Canadian Falls, which is an upgrade over your previous room, she said, smiling, but not with her eyes. Enjoy your stay at the Falls View Hotel. She handed us our room keys and pointed us towards the elevator, telling us we would be staying in room 5849. I couldn't help but notice that her hand was shaking as she handed the keys to me. One elevator was broken, and so there was a line for the remaining working ones, but we waited and eventually were brought up to our floor at lightning speed, stopping abruptly every 20 feet along the way to let people on and off. We entered our room, and I immediately felt a chill run up my spine. I jerked my head around, trying to find the source of the feeling of eyes upon me. Of course, there was no one in the room but us. "You feel that?" my girlfriend Jennifer asked. She shivered and clutched herself. "I don't like this room. Can we get a different one?" Both of us reluctantly entered, and I went over to the phone on the desk in the corner, hoping to reach the front desk. I called downstairs and made an excuse that the room was too cold, which it actually was suddenly, and was told they were completely booked, and there were no other rooms available. I guess we'll have to make do, I said. We're just gonna be sleeping here. Do you want to go over to the falls and check out the view for a bit? Yes, she said without hesitation. Let's get out of here. We stayed out in the cold for longer than we should have, until our faces were numb from the February wind coming off the falls. We ventured out and down the pathway and held hands, looking at the misty water being lit up by high-powered multicolored lights. It was cold and windy, but for a while we forgot about that unpleasant feeling we'd had in the hotel room. We went out for dinner at a restaurant where you could look out the window and see the falls, then wandered around visiting shops for a while before heading back to our room. The unpleasant feeling wasn't so strong this time as we entered, and I tried not to mention it. Instead, looking out the window and enjoying the view, which we hadn't done the first time we'd entered the room, too anxious to escape. After a while, we both settled into bed. It was hard to fall asleep, but eventually I did. When I awoke, it was to the sound of splashing water. I felt freezing cold, as if I were in a giant refrigerator. As I exhaled, I could see my breath plume into the air in the light of the casino's fluorescence from outside. I turned my head to the left, looking into the bathroom, which could be glimpsed from the bed. At first, my blurry eyes mistook what I saw, and I thought it was Jennifer having a late-night bath. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, and when I opened them I saw that Jennifer was in bed beside me, not in the tub. I looked back into the other room and blinked again, clearing my blurry vision. There was a shriveled old woman in the bath, grinning with a smile full of rotten brown teeth. Her eyes were missing and only dark cavities could be seen there. For a few seconds I couldn't do anything. I just laid there, frozen. The old woman continued staring at me with her dead-eyed gaze, her rotten smile growing wider, and I felt myself begin to shiver as the room grew even colder. I realized I wasn't doing anything and tried to open my mouth to scream, but found myself paralyzed. I couldn't move or speak, but then she began leaning forward, swinging her gray, shriveled, waterlogged leg over the side of the tub, and I finally managed to let out a piercing scream, one louder and shriller than ever before in my life. Jennifer woke up and was trying to comfort me, and I realized my eyes were squeezed shut. When I opened them, the woman was gone. I tried to explain to her what had happened. Immediately she was rationalizing it all, telling me it was a dream. She even went into the bathroom and checked to make sure, like a parent checking the closet for monsters. She assured me that the bathtub was bone dry. It was just a nightmare, she said, coming back into the bedroom. Part of me was terrified that she had her back turned on that room, that the shriveled old woman would sneak up behind her and strangle her from behind. I pictured that wrinkled, water-bloated arm coming around her neck, and that horrible smile peeking out from behind her as she snapped her neck. But none of that happened. It was still and quiet in the room, aside from the sound of my rapid breathing, eventually slowing down to a normal pace. "Are you going to be all right?" Jennifer asked, looking concerned. It's amazing how quickly we can convince ourselves that these types of things were just a dream. If something supernatural has ever happened to you, maybe you can relate. Like an idiot, I told myself it didn't happen, that what Jennifer had told me was true. It was just a nightmare. "Yeah, I'll be okay," I said after a while. It was just a nightmare. It had to be. For a long time I didn't sleep. I was afraid, too. I was worried that old woman would be there waiting for me in my dreams. I laid there in bed, insisting we leave a light on for what felt like hours, but eventually I must have drifted off to sleep because I was the one who woke up to a scream this time, and also to the sound of the bathroom door slamming shut. I saw her. Jennifer was screaming, hugging me tightly to herself. She's in the bathroom. That old woman is in the bathroom. I stood up, and my feet immediately felt wet when they hit the carpeted floor. I looked down to see wet footprints leading up to the foot of our bed and a huge pool of water there, as if someone had come from the bathtub and stood there for a while, watching us as we slept. For some reason this time I didn't feel scared, I felt angry. I felt like I needed to defend Jennifer from this thing which had been terrorizing us and harassing us, making us feel unwanted and unsafe in a room I had spent hundreds of dollars for. I stood up on shaky legs, forcing myself to take a step forward, and then another. "What are you doing?" Jennifer yelled. She's in there, taking a deep breath, ignoring my pounding heart and every ounce of my being telling me to run away. I pushed the bathroom door open and stepped inside. There was no one there, but the room was misty and humid. It felt stifling, as if someone had just taken a 3-hour steaming hot shower in there, or a long warm bath. The mirror was fogged over, and as I stood there looking at it, words began to form. Letters being written as if by an invisible finger. "Get out of my room," it said, in large block letters. I slowly backed out of the bathroom. It suddenly occurred to me that I didn't know what I was dealing with. This thing could reach into my chest and stop my heart for all I knew. It could be extremely dangerous. "Let's go," I said. "Let's get the hell out of here." We ran out of the room in our shorts and t-shirts, not even wearing shoes. The people at the front desk looked at us like we were crazy until we told them which room we were staying in. "Oh my gosh," the clerk at the desk said, rapidly typing on the keyboard in front of them. "That room is never supposed to." After looking at the computer screen for several more moments, they called over to a manager. "Hey, Buck, can you come here for a minute?" The two of them spoke in hushed voices for a while before the manager came over to talk to us. "Alex tells me you're having some issues with your room," he began. "We'll be happy to provide you with a free room as a token of apology for your inconvenience. Due to our lack of capacity, we can transfer you to our sister hotel for the remainder of your stay. Again, our sincere apologies, and the rest of your accommodations this weekend will be entirely on us." I began to speak up, but Jennifer grabbed my hand and gripped it firmly. She just wanted to leave this hotel. "And so did I. We'll need someone to grab our things from the room," I said. "I'm not going back up there." He gulped in a very telling way. "I'll see what I can do." An hour later, a young, terrified-looking bellhop delivered us our luggage. Then we left the hotel thankfully behind. I did some research when I got home, trying to find out exactly what happened in that room and why the ghost was so angry, so insisted on keeping others out of there. I wondered who that woman was and why she was so tied to that room and the solitude it afforded. What I discovered after some deep diving online was that someone died in that hotel room, a woman who was staying with her boyfriend on a vacation, just like we were. But he left her after a bitter argument, telling her he was going to go sleep with someone else. Apparently she loved him more than anything, and was so depressed over him leaving that she wanted a way out. The woman went back to her hotel room and took a bath, falling asleep in the tub after consuming a lot of alcohol and sleeping pills. She hoped he would come back to find her there, but he never did. Instead, a hotel employee stumbled upon her body after checkout time when she came to clean the room. Ever since that day, people who stay in the room say they feel cold chills up their spine. Some say they feel hands running through their hair in the dead of night as they attempt to fall asleep, and others especially couples like us, find wet footprints on the carpet when no one has set foot inside the bathtub. I flew out to New York some nights ago for my good friend's wedding. Despite a relatively turbulent flight filled with constant rerouting, the trip has otherwise been life-changing so far. I don't travel often. My career is pretty demanding and free time is a rarity, so I figured this trip would be a good way to kill two birds with one stone. I would head to New York early to check out some awesome and iconic sites, and then I'd segue into attending this major milestone for one of my dearest mates. The hotel that I'm staying at, Hotel Salvis, is pretty damn awesome. The rooms are gorgeous, the service is fantastic, and there's a real nice flair to the space, for lack of a better term. Coming back to a place like this night, after hours of sightseeing in NYC, was an absolute treat. Of all the interesting things about the hotel, the one I have to call out the most is the lobby. It is sprawling, huge, gorgeous. It has a breathtaking bar area, a luxurious restaurant area, and a large seating space adorned with some gorgeous furniture. It is a massive 360-degree area that has exits all around it, and of course a sizable front desk area with lots of eager employees at the helm. You could take the hallways leading out to the exits or up to the elevators if you'd like, but it always felt fun to pass through the large middle area of the lobby and soak in some of the fun energy. On top of that, most of the hallways were generally quite empty, so it felt nice to be where all the action was. What I loved more than anything was that it was always lively in the lobby. It's 11 p.m. and you're looking little glum. Peter. I do have a resting sad face. Good catch, sir. Name's not Peter. It's Kevin, actually. The folks sitting at the bar started to laugh a little bit. An elderly woman seated near the bartender shot me a smile. Sounds like the newbie wants everyone to know his name. Maybe he'll even sit down and join us. She said playfully, I've got some plans That's when another older gentleman in a brown leather jacket interrupted. Sit down and have a drink. You have nowhere else to be. Fuck it. This was kind of what I was hoping would happen. It felt like everyone here was having a good time with each other, so it felt nice to be invited to the festivities. I sat and enjoyed everyone there for what was a very fun few hours. They asked me about what brought me here and why I was visiting, and I have to say they were incredible listeners. Drinks were on them, hell yes, and as someone who doesn't get to spend a lot of time just going with the flow, a spontaneous night of drinking with strangers was just what the doctor ordered. It was a well-needed reprieve from my usual life of work hard, save money, you can relax later. I was on holiday, and to have such worldly folks hanging off my every word was a good feeling off the heels of a fantastic night on an already fantastic vacation. I went up to my room, ready to call it a day. Wedding season was going to kick in very soon, so I figured it'd be smart to get some extra shut-eye. I entered my room. As I changed into my sleeping clothes, I noticed an enclosed envelope on my bedside table. It was tucked under a plastic display that had some generic hotel policy stuff on it. Interesting. Maybe some sort of coupon or thank you for stay with us. Note, not ever being one to take my time in opening up gifts, I snatched the envelope, opened it, and gave the letter inside a read. I was expecting to see some fancy letterhead, but instead, what I found in this envelope was a scribbled note on a piece of paper that looked as if it had been torn out of an old notebook. It read, "By now, you probably have some sense of what's going on. My best advice is to be very mindful about your remaining hours of tranquility. Assuming you're reading this on Thursday night, you have about 24 hours remaining. The hotel rules are mostly accurate. That said, no one can actually promise you that suicide will help you escape. If you want to talk, I'm the guy with the red jacket in the lobby. Best wishes you. I was aware that this was likely a sinister prank by someone, but it still felt unbelievably intrusive. I wasn't sure if it was the guest who stayed in this room before me deciding to pull a trick on me, or if it was a room service person who had a morbid sense of humor. Whatever it was, it felt a bit extreme. I pondered it over for a moment, and then left my room, went into the empty hallway, and headed towards the elevator. I wanted to report this. I wanted to get it resolved and out of my brain as fast as possible so that I could have a good night's sleep. It was odd. Even though I was something like approximately 5 floors above the main lobby, it felt like I could hear the buzz and sound of the main floor much, much closer to me than I knew it was. I arrived at the ground floor and went right up to the front desk staff, letter in hand. There they were, fully attentive and bright as always. I felt a bit ashamed coming up to them with something negative to report, but I figured it had to be done. Hey, sorry, I just needed some help. Saw something weird in my room. I stopped as I saw both of the 2 front desk workers eye the envelope in my hand. They whispered to each other and then turned their attention back to me. "What can we do for you, sir?" they asked. Yeah. So I had this letter show up on the table in my room. It had some weird stuff written on it, and it said it was from the guy in the red jacket. The hotel worker nodded. He's heard this one before, I thought to myself. He subtly rolled his eyes before responding. "We'll, take care of this immediately, sir. Thank you for bringing it to our attention." The front desk worker nudged his colleague, and they both made their way into the lobby. They looked back at me with a quick nod, sort of signaling await right their message, and I watched them head to the lobby area. They walked towards a solitary man donning a red jacket, sitting in a large seating area, alone. He stuck out like a sore thumb. Couldn't miss him. I'm not sure what compelled me to do this, but I decided to walk over to them to catch their conversation. When I arrived, they were wrapping up, but I could still hear snippets of their back and forth. The hotel staff saying that it wasn't his place to influence guests, and him saying, I got it. Sorry. As they saw me arrive, the gentleman in the red jacket turned to me and spoke. "Nice to meet you, Kevin. I'm sorry about the letter." The front desk workers looked at me, their eyes red. "Are we all good here?" I shot them a moderately confused nod. "All good," I said back. The staff made their way out of the lobby and back to their desks. I continued to stand near the man in the red jacket. "Mind if I sit?" I asked him. He nodded. I took a seat. "So, how do you know my name again?" I asked. He snickered. "I overheard all of you at the bar earlier tonight. Sounds like you guys were having a great time." He motioned to the crew of elderly folks who were all seated at the bar close to us. As he looked over, they noticed me and started cheering. I heard a smattering of their different voices. "Hey, Kevin's back. Oh, look, it's Kevin. Join us, man. Let's make it a late night." The gang was still all there, as welcoming and excited as ever. The man in the red jacket started laughing. "Am I meant to believe you still don't get it yet?" he said. He continued silently snickering to himself. It was annoying. "Hey man, if you have a penchant for leaving incredibly inappropriate letters in people's rooms, I want to let you know that." He interrupted me. "I'm trying to help you. Clearly, you've been in La La Land. That's not necessarily all on you. The hotel doesn't always make it super clear. They're trying to help, but you have to pay attention and actually read the crap they give you with your room key or the stuff they leave in your room. Most people don't realize it immediately, and since others aren't really allowed to say too much, bad things happen. So if you want the short explanation, you can't leave this place. Hey ha ha ha, right? As I'd suspected, this guy was just a freak with a sick sense of humor. And why is that? Am I going to be absorbed into the hotel, the Shining style? Are we following Hotel California rules? Let me guess, I can check out any time I'd like, but I can never leave. He interrupted my snark with an exasperated groan. Let me rephrase it, smartass. You shouldn't leave, you very much can. I've seen you leaving constantly, on your merry way, every single day, but very soon you should be stopping that, he said, while pointing all across the main floor to all the exits surrounding us. Before I could respond, there was an awkward pause. The folks at the bar were heating up with laughter. They were really into their conversation. Lod, I found a gap where they quieted down, and I continued. And why is that? If I leave the hotel, am I going to be caught in some sort of sinister happening that takes place in New York City this time of year? Are there ghosts trolling the streets, gremlins, maybe? I said, this isn't New York, asshole. What? He leaned in closer. This isn't New York. It may look like it, sound like it, taste like it, but it's not New York. This guy was fucking with me. It was the one single not great thing that had happened on this trip so far, and at this point I was over it. Buddy, I get that you like to play pranks on people, but this is getting... He got up from his seat. Listen, I did my part. I'm not a talker, and this conversation's going to go in circles, so let me just leave it at this. Whether you're a superstitious fucker or the most grounded son of a bitch there is, just be sure you're back inside tomorrow, well before 8 p.m. I saw you when you first came in. We all did. 5 days ago, tomorrow marks your 6th-day anniversary. I'd recommend playing it safe. Best wishes, he said. He looked at the exit doors, and then back at me. Once you make it to them, I think you'll understand. And with that, he got up and walked off, leaving me with a strange, unsettling feeling. While he said his words with conviction, my gut didn't feel great about this guy. I didn't buy it. I got up to head back to my room when I noticed the folks at the bar all looking at me and all lighting up as I walked past. Fuck it. The bar lobby is always a good time. I needed to shake off the bad energy out as I made my way to an open bar seat. The bartender gave me the same line he said to me earlier in the night. Are you looking a little glum? Peter, it's still Kevin, but nice to see you again, sir. I plopped down at the lively bar area. The elderly woman I spoke with the earlier kicked it off again. You got any new stories for us, Kevin? Maybe tell us what you do for a living. I laughed. They were odd but endearing. I rattled off random anecdotes and stories, and again the group was great at asking follow-up questions, listening carefully, and laughing at every joke I said. Even the folks at the far end of the bar who couldn't hear me seemed to be having a pretty good time just by me being there. While being the life of the party was nice, it still couldn't shake the weird pit-of-my-stomach sensation I had from speaking with the man in the red jacket. After about an hour of hanging out, I decided to leave and go up to my room. As I made my way to the elevator, I looked back to the folks in the lobby. They remained lively, loud, drinking, immersed in conversations. They smiled at me as I looked back. I continued on my way, but thought to myself, the lobby feels safe. I want to stay there. I made it back to my room. My friends were going to arrive very late that night, and so we were all going to meet up together tomorrow. I made sure to focus on getting a good night's sleep and tried to keep my mind off of the weird happenings I'd run into that day I slept in. and woke up the next day, completely fresh and ready for the day ahead of me. Or so I thought. I started with my normal morning routine. Splash my face with some water, a big stretch, cup of joe from the coffee machine in my room. Spend some quality time waking up before checking my phone. This was holiday time. Less screens, more mindfulness. I pulled the window curtains and looked outside. I admired the beauty of the city. This isn't New York, Could have fooled me, you psycho. After a tranquil moment, I opened up my phone. I was excited to dig into what our plans for today were. My friends were wholly responsible for where we were going to meet, what we were going to do, etc. In the spirit of my holiday, I was once again ready to go with the flow. I looked at my phone. The group text conversation with my friends was blowing up. They were all downstairs in the lobby. Awesome. Glad they all made it okay. I texted them to let them know I'd meet them at the bar, and I was on my way. I left my room, went down the empty hallway, and made my way to the elevator. The words of the man in the red jacket were starting to float around in my brain. The hotel doesn't always make it super clear. You have to pay attention. I got in the elevator. The doors closed in front of me. I decided to properly take in my surroundings during this short trek to the main floor, and noticed a large advertisement in the elevator. I read it carefully. Hotel Salvas. You're not just safe. You're with friends. What? Dang, the doors open, and I was on the ground floor, dazzling and gorgeous as ever, with an attentive crew working the front desk, and that same gang of folks hanging out in the lively middle area of the lobby. I walked towards the bar, and again, the usual suspects had noticed me and lit up immediately. It dawned on me that a lot of these folks were drinking very early in the day. I mean, shit, it was like 11 a.m., and I'd seen some of these folks drinking into the late hours of the night before 2. The group started up as they always did. Kevin, got some stories for us, Big Kev, man of the hour. I sat amongst these strangers while simultaneously checking my phone minute by minute and scanning my surroundings for my friends. My friends kept saying they were at the bar, but I couldn't see them anywhere. It was all right, though. The lobby felt safe. The lobby was all right. Jesus, I noticed that my inner monologue was getting stranger. Why was my gut feeling continually, almost intrusively telling me that the lobby was safe? I continued checking my phone and looking around for them, while haphazardly answering the questions of the folks at the bar and riffing off of their anecdotes. It was the same folks as before. The elderly woman, the bartender, the man in the brown leather coat, and other familiar faces that had grown to become mainstays here. What's new in your world, Kevin? Oh, not much, really. You know, I came here with Debbie. You know Debbie. There she always goes wandering off. I should have kept an eye on her. That's great. Always good to come with company. Looking a little glum, petered. I'm Kevin, but it's cool. You can call me Peter if you want. I was barely attentive and just continually eyeing my phone. My friends kept insisting they were right here, grabbing drinks from the bar. Was there another bar inside that I had completely missed or something? I continued lounging around, and to my continual surprise, even my half-assed heart-not-in-it answers to the bar folks were being received very positively. I guess they all just liked my vibe. Fighting off thoughts about scary hotel folktales or fears that maybe I was dead, and this was some sort of purgatory, I got up from my seat and headed out to one of the exits. Even with the man in the red jacket's warnings in the back of my mind, I had some time right? I texted my friends to let them know I'd meet them at the front entrance. I opened the doors and went into the outside world, and things were fine. I took a stroll around The neighborhood, I smiled at strangers. This was still New York. Of course it was. I unfortunately still couldn't find my friends. The area was so large that we came to terms that maybe we were all confused about where we were and needed to jump on a video call soon. But I still enjoy my hours in the city, remaining diligent of the time and keeping my eyes peeled for more responses from my friends. I made my way back to the hotel at 6 p.m. sharp. Let's arrive early, I thought to myself. I won't tempt fate. I arrived and walked right on through the lobby past all the enthused strangers I had come to know over the last few days. I made my way up to my room. I sat on my bed. I was ignoring texts and calls from my friends at this point. I wanted to wait until it was past 8 p.m. once I knew everything was okay. Then we could all meet up again. The minutes passed by excruciatingly long. What was I doing? This was stupid. This anxiety wasn't warranted. Red jacket guy was just fucking with me. Everything is fine. I'm sure me and my friends are all just lost and need to look at a map or something. I took a deep breath, letting the time pass. It was 7:40 p.m. Fucking hell. Time wasn't moving fast enough. To get my mind off of everything. I made a cup of coffee and explored the hotel room. I pulled the curtains back and looked outside. Still gorgeous. Still New York. Baby, I explored the drawers and cupboards in the room, all empty. Fair enough. I scanned the room, bed, closet. A quaint-looking bedside table with a plastic display on it with some generic hotel language. I wasn't sure if my mind was playing tricks on me, but it still felt like I could still hear the buzzing of the lobby, the music, the banter, glasses clinking. The lobby was goddamn it. My inner monologue was seriously starting to slip away from me. I was probably spending too much time there. I could still hear the bartender in my head saying, "You're looking a little glum, Peter," and the elderly woman saying, "Oh, Kevin's stories are marvelous." Always a thrill to hear new stories. The sounds were so vivid. It almost felt like all of them were directly downstairs from me or something. 7:55 p.m. I continued exploring. I opened another drawer. Had a laminated sheet of paper and a gun next to it. What the fuck? I could feel myself shivering a little bit. My heart was racing. I pulled the curtains back again to peek outside at New York. I needed to ground myself. Yep, it was still there. Still New York. It's all okay. Maybe just something the last guest left in this room. I returned to the drawer. I read the sheet next to the gun. Its title was A Guide to Quick and Effective Suicide by Hotel Salvesno. Didn't need that in my life. Just ignore it. Woost ignore it. 7:59 p.m. Staring outside. Still New York. And there it was. 8 p.m. Then 8:01 p.m. 8:02 p.m. 8:03 p.m. It was all okay. Knock, knock, knock. Fuck. Someone was at the door. I was on autopilot at this point. I grabbed the gun from the drawer. I looked outside my door's peephole. It was the man in the red jacket. I'd had enough of this bullshit. Trembling, I opened the door and immediately pointed my gun at him. His hands shot up above his head instantly. "Hey, I'm sorry, I cut him off. Stop fucking with me," I shouted. "I'm not, I swear. I'm not. I was sorry that I was." Shit, he looked scared. All of the fears I'd been pushing to the back of my mind were coming to the forefront. I asked him, "Am I dead? Is this like purgatory or something?" No, you're not dead. You're still on Earth. What's with the weird shit around the hotel? Why is everyone in the lobby all the time? For fuck's sake, I'm pointing a fucking gun at you and shouting in the hallway, and there's no one else here. He kept his hands up. He took in a deep breath and he answered. The lobby's the only place that drowns out the sounds. That's why we're all down there. Why we're always down there. The sounds. I asked, fucking hell, please don't shoot me. I have no idea what'll happen if I die, he said. What does that even mean? Didn't you read the guides in your room? On your bedside table? The thing I put my envelope under? He said back, nervously shouting. That bullshit hotel rules guide on the table in the plastic casing. No, I guess I didn't. I backed into the room and slammed the door behind me. I put my gun on the bedside table. I read over the plastic display's generic hotel guidelines. Guidelines for hotel solvusic stays of tranquility. On us, we strongly discourage guests from leaving the hotel after the tranquility period has passed. The tranquility period cannot be extended. Do not impede people's autonomy. Their decisions are theirs and theirs alone. If you choose to kill yourself, or if you die of natural causes, it is possible that you can escape this fate. Drinks are free. Let our bartender extraordinaire take care of you. Tell him Peter sent you. No smoking in the lobby, please. Have a wonderful stay. Asterisk Hotel Salvus cannot fully assure that you will be able to escape. Before I could process what I'd read, I heard it, the sounds. I could feel them inside me. It felt like the whole world was shaking, like my soul was shaking, like banshees, shrieking at their absolutely highest pitch, flooding my senses. I pulled the curtains aside and looked outside the window. It wasn't a city anymore. It wasn't anything. Just a never-ending space that stretched as far as I could look. The space had colors of thick black and crimson red all around it. I continued staring to catch the sight of anything that looked familiar. Off in the very far distance, shrouded by the fog of black and red colors, I swore I could see the Empire State Building. What the fuck is this? Fuck the noises. I had to get away from them. I backed away from the window in fear. I stumbled out of the room. The man in the red jacket was still there. You're hearing it now, aren't you? He said. I was emotional. Where the fuck am I, man? He helped me to my feet. Let's drown out the noise first. We walked down the hallway, into the elevator, and down to the ground floor. The noises were everywhere, a choir of it. It was amplified, overwhelming. I could feel it in the center of my head. All around me. We emerged into the lobby. The familiar music and liveliness. He was right. It was drowning out the noise. Little by little, the lobby is safe. The group of usual guests at the bar lit up as we rounded the corner. Everyone was there, seated, smiling as we arrived. I made it to the bar with the man in the red jacket beside me. The bartender greeted us. You're looking little plum, Peter. I didn't dignify it with a response this time. I just sighed. At least the screeching was somewhat blocked out. I looked up at the bartender. He wasn't really looking at me. He was looking past me to the exit doors surrounding us on the main floor. I turned around and looked at the exits with the backdrop of a never-ending space of crimson red and pitch black. There it was, them pressing up against the doors, wanting to be let inside. Come on, Kevin, tell us some new stories, said the elderly woman. I ignored it. I came with Debbie. Should have kept my eyes on her, but I lost her, said the man in the brown leather jacket. Ignored it. The man in the red jacket started speaking. Peter is the bartender's son. Years back when they first arrived, Peter stayed outside past the tranquility period. He didn't know what it meant at the time. He motioned to the others seated with me. Some people have been here longer than others. Many of them lost someone they traveled with to the outside. Didn't realize the severity of the tranquility period, and now they're all here in the lobby, looking for distractions. To drown out the noise, I scanned the bar. Everyone was smiling and cheering. but I saw the crinkles of desperation in the corners of their eyes, something I didn't notice before. They had to be loud. To drown it all out, where are we? The man in the red jacket took a moment to really think. We're still here, on planet Earth. From the discussions all of us have had at the bar, it sounds like we all had the same thing happen on our trip here. At some point, late in the flight, the pilot had to reroute due to turbulence. Shit, that happened to me too, and we ended up here very, very similar to New York by all accounts. At first, anyways. Heck, if you stare out hard enough into the strange horizon surrounding us, you can see little hints that NYC physically ain't that far from us. But right now, we're trapped, not in purgatory, very much ourselves and very much alive. But if we leave this building, we're at the whim of whatever's out there, and whatever's out there doesn't seem to be very friendly. I looked outside. The noses were coming to the forefront again. Those shrieks, at first, it sounded like evil creatures, banshees, demons, something in that universe, but something about the sounds was starting to become clear to me. There was almost a human quality to them. You're looking little glum. Peter, I could sense the lump in his throat as the bartender said it again. Looking straight outside, straight at something. The remnants of someone familiar begging to be let in. As I watched the chaos outside the exits, I turned my attention back to the folks around me, the loud anecdotes and conversations and stories and drinks designed to drown out the noise. My phone continued blowing up with calls and texts from friends and family, but I ignored them. None of that was important right now. Soon, I was going to formulate a plan, figure out exactly where all of us were, and see if there was some way we could get out of this place. In the meantime, I owed the man in the red jacket a drink for saving me from what seemed to be a hellish eternal fate. No, it wasn't a celebration, a wedding, or a holiday anymore, but it was okay. The lobby is safe. When I left college, I immediately started working as a genealogist. Basically, people pay me money to do research into their family history. I research the names of their ancestors, their causes of death, and any mentions of them in newspapers. I've been doing it for almost 10 years, and I'm good at it. A few weeks back, a millionaire widow called me up asking for my services. Apparently, her parents had emigrated from Switzerland when she was young, but she didn't know much about them other than their names and the town that they'd been born in. It's rarely necessary for me to actually travel to a country to do my work, but I knew right away that I'd have to on this case. None of my usual sources had any info on the town she'd named. It was a small village high in the Swiss Alps. Apparently, none of the records there had been digitized. None of my usual routes worked. Baptisms, births, death certificates, all turned up nothing. I told my client that I'd need to travel there personally, and she quickly agreed to arrange the travel for me. I landed in the country in the early afternoon, picked up my rental car, and immediately set off into the mountains. I'd never visited the Switzerland before, but it was spectacular. Hidden valleys surrounded by sweeping mountain ranges, all connected by winding roads littered with SWITCHBACKS. My drive took me high up into the mountains. I turned around the curve and drove directly into a thick curtain of fog. Visibility immediately dropped to something like 20 feet. On the winding switchbacks, that meant that you couldn't see the start of the turn until you've already reached it. Sheer cliffs loom on either side, so I was eager to get off the road. I was considering just pulling off the side of the road and sleeping in my car. I was looking for a good spot when the fog cleared a little bit as I climbed the switchbacks. I rounded a curve and, to my shock, spotted a hotel sitting just off the road set into the mountain. Bright red letters covered the side reading Hotel Belvedere. There was a small parking lot with about a dozen parking spaces across the street from the hotel. Here is a picture of the hotel. I parked my car and made my way into the hotel to see if I could wait out the fog overnight. The inside of the hotel looked old, all dyed wood and wrought iron. A man stood behind the desk in the lobby, probably in his late 60s. When I shut the door behind me, he shot a tired look in my direction. "Speak English?" I asked. "A little bit," he said. "You want room?" I nodded, and he continued. "Room is 125 francs. Good." I nodded again and pulled out the bills from my wallet. The man sighed and held up a hand. "You are only guest tonight. I am owner of the hotel here, and I don't want to stay here all night. If you stay you here alone, okay." I was surprised at that, but I figured it'd be fine. The old guy didn't want to spend all night at a desk waiting for guests who would never come. "Yeah, that'd be fine," I said. "One thing," the man said. "If you stay, you must stay in room with door locked all night." "Okay." I figured he just didn't want me messing around with his hotel, so I agreed. He turned around and pulled out my key, a wrought iron key that looked straight from the 1800s. "Room 7, he said. "Top floor." I headed up to my room and walked inside. It looked out of another century, sporting a sink and glasses inside the room. It also had a balcony with an amazing view of the windy roads that I'd driven up. Some of the fog had cleared, so I was able to take this picture. Picture a view from Hotel after the sunset. I was getting pretty antsy. My body still wasn't ready to fall asleep because of the jet lag, so the hours passed, and soon it was a little past midnight. I lay in bed just staring at the ceiling. There was no cell service, and of course no Wi-Fi. I had seen the owner drive his car down the road, so I knew I was alone in the hotel. So I did what anyone would do in my situation. I explored the hotel. Here is a video of me walking around the hotel. The place was old, like I said. It also had all the strange personalizations that I'd grown accustomed to in Europe. I walked across the hall to the room across from mine and tried the door. It opened easily. The inside had clearly not been cleaned for years. A layer of dust covered every surface, and spider webs decorated the corners of the room. I was using my phone's light to inspect the different surfaces, and its reflection glittered in the webs. I walked up to the window and rubbed away a bit of dust, peering through it. This side of the hotel would face up the mountain instead of down the valley like my room did. A full moon had risen, so it was easy to see the 30 figures standing on the road above the hotel looking down at me. They were spaced evenly, and each was carrying a candle. I froze, trying to get a better look. Each of the figures stood motionless, all staring down at the hotel. I couldn't see their eyes, but it was clear from their body language that they were watching me. Most only held candles, but I realized with a sinking sensation that some held scythes or other metal implements in their hands. I fumbled with my phone to turn off the light, and the room fell back into darkness. The figures on the road turned and began walking down the road towards the hotel. I scrambled back from the window and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I ran through possibilities in my head. Was this some Swiss tradition? That didn't fit. What about the sides? I checked my phone again and saw the numbers 1:05 a.m. blinking back at me. Maybe they would just pass by the hotel and head towards the village. Maybe they'd. An enormous bang rang out through the hotel as the front door opened. My mouth was dry as I scanned the room for a potential weapon. A heavy glass cup beside the sink was all I could see. I hefted it in my hand and backed up from my door, preparing to throw. A dozen footsteps rang out down the corridor, stopping just outside my room. The doorknob turned, and several fists hit the door. Still, the lock held. I turned back to my balcony and ran out onto it. I tried to remain silent as I scrambled up onto the railing and jumped onto the balcony of the next room over. My feet hit the metal just as the wood from my room's door cracked and splintered from an impact. I heard footsteps in my room, the sound of my bed being flipped over, the dough ripping as they tore apart my backpack. The entire time, I didn't hear a single word spoken by any of them. I waited for hours on the other room's balcony, hoping they wouldn't step out onto mine. I heard the last of them leave. Then I waited more. I waited until the sky lit with the rising sun, and only then climbed back to my room. It had been ransacked. My clothes had been torn apart, and my laptop broken in two. I made my way down the stairs to my car. Luckily, I had grabbed my car keys before leaving the room, and drove away from there for hours and hours. When I finally reached a city, I did some research. The website I found said that Hotel Belvedere has been closed for years. I'm currently moving across the country from Portland, Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia for a job. Thankfully, I found a furnished apartment in Atlanta, so I wouldn't have to take any bulky furniture, and figured I could fit pretty much all belongings into my Toyota Highlander for the cross-country drive. It was just me and my dog, Meatball, and I decided we could make a fun trip of it. It was going to be a grueling 3-day drive if I really pushed myself, but I thought I would stretch it to 5 or 6 and take the opportunity to camp in some of the incredible national parks we were going to be driving through. I'll be honest with you, even though I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I've never been an outdoorsy kind of guy. I'm honestly not too sure what I was thinking when I planned this trip. I guess I just romanticized the great American road trip in my head a bit too often. Plus, I wager it would be cheaper and easier than to have to find a pet-friendly hotel every night. The first night we spent in a campground outside of Pocatello, Idaho. It was a beautiful area. Hills of golden grass stretched up into snow-covered mountains. I watched the sunset as I cooked me and Meatball a hamburger each over my camping stove. Looking out onto the amber valley below reminded me of that movie where Tom Cruise punches a horse in the face. I can't remember the name of it. Outside of that brief moment of happiness, watching the sunset and telling Meatball about how he should never piss off Tom Cruise, the first night camping was hell. I didn't know how to properly set up the tent and could only get it halfway erected, and the mosquitoes were in cloud, so thick I thought I would choke to death if I breathed in too deeply. That is when I thought I might have bitten off a bit more than I could chew with this road trip. The second night we camped in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. This time I set the tent up correctly, and the mosquitoes didn't seem as bad, but it was hot. Unbelievably hot, and we didn't have much water. Another night in hell. The third night I decided fuck camping. Meatball and I are going to live in luxury tonight. We're getting a hotel. It ended up just being a shitty motel outside of Wichita, Kansas. We got a late start that morning, and it was already dark by the time I found the dumpy little roadside flophouse on a desolate flat stretch of highway that seemed miles away from anything. Picture the house from Courage the Cowardly Dog, and you'll have a good idea of how smack dab in the middle of nowhere this place was. I pulled into the ramshackle 2-story motel and saw the roof seemed to bow inwards towards the middle. It was the type of place that you could tell had never been a nice place to spend the night, but it had air conditioning and a bed. That's all I really cared about. I hadn't slept well the last 2 nights, and wasn't sure how much further I could drive, and I sure as hell wasn't about to camp another night. This was my only option. I went into the office and requested a room from the Walmart-sized woman who staffed the front desk for the night or for an hour. She asked me without looking up from her magazine. The night the woman raised her eyes and stared at me a moment before speaking again. Single or double? She asked. Whatever is available. The woman gestured a meaty arm to the parking lot. Son, there is my car, and there is your car. Do you see any other cars? Everything is available, single or double. Double, I said, slightly embarrassed. I was wondering, do you allow dogs? I'm planning on having my dog in the room with me. The women stared at me again. We rent rooms by the hour. So yes, I'd say we allow all sorts of animals in here. I took the key, collected my bag and meatball from the car, and headed to my ground floor room. Room 319. It was the furthest end of the L-shaped motel from the office. I guess that front desk woman wanted her privacy as much as I wanted mine. I approached the door, unlocked it, and swung the door wide. The room smelled of mold and had pink wallpaper peeling from the corner near the bathroom. Meatball growled and pulled the leash in the opposite direction. Figuring he had to go to the bathroom, I tossed my bag into the room, closed the door, and walked Meatball to the field across the street where he could potty. I stared up at the stars until he finished, and we walked back across the street. Crossing the parking lot, I noticed lights flick on and off in some of the rooms. One room had the shimmering blue glow of a television. Oh, everything is available, huh? I thought to myself. I opened the door to my room, and still Meatball tugged the leash in the opposite direction. I dragged him inside and threw him on the bed opposite mine. He seemed tense. Hair stood up on the back of his neck, and he glared. Unblinking in the direction of the bathroom, I checked the rest of the room out. It was nothing unexpected, just your everyday hourly rate motel. Dirty bathrooms with single-ply TP. Musty carpet that probably hadn't been vacuumed in years. Small desk with a heavy and uncomfortable chair. Cinder block walls and a TV that was missing a remote control. I sat down on the bed and pulled from my bag a Ziploc bag of dog food and a bowl and fed Meatball his dinner. He wouldn't eat it. I moved to Meatball's bed and tried to calm him down, scratching behind his ears and hugging him gently. When the TV turned on, "Welcome to your final destination." The TV blared at maximum volume. The screen showed an airplane pilot grinning ear to ear while speaking into an intercom. "We here at Broken Wings Airlines hope you enjoy your stay in." The pilot never finished his sentence, but stared directly into the camera, unblinking, still holding the intercom to his gaping mouth. The co-pilot also stared straight ahead with a maniacal smile, and after a few moments, a flight attendant entered the cockpit and joined them, staring seemingly out of the TV. I began to hear what sounded like muffled screams from the passengers behind the cockpit door. I stood up and turned the TV off. I listened to the crackling screen of the old tube television and decided to unplug it as well. I turned to join Meatball back on his bed when there was a knock at the door. I walked over and looked through the peephole but didn't see anyone. I closed the curtains and slid the chain lock in place over the flimsy motel door. I hate motels. I'm not sure how anyone ever gets a good night of sleep in them with nothing separating your unconscious dreaming body from the entire world except for a flimsy plywood door. But hey, at least it is better than camping. I went into the bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth. I was dead tired, and I knew I would be asleep within 30 seconds of hitting the pillow, no matter how ratty the beds were. I remember deciding right then I would push through to Atlanta as soon as possible and decided the great American road trip I had long dreamed of was just a bunch of annoying, inconvenient bullshit. I jumped into bed and turned out the lights, planning to be asleep in the next 30 seconds. 15 seconds after the lights were out, I heard a voice that wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't Meatballs. Oh my God, man, the voice shouted in a panic. Am I going to die? I sat up in an instant after realizing the voice sounded like it was coming from my own bathroom. I jumped to my feet and turned on the lamp next to the bed. I'm fucking dying. IMD. The terrified voice cried from my dark bathroom. A horrible, wet gurgling sound then seemed to fill the room like someone was drowning on their own vomit. I kicked open the bathroom door, and on the floor lay a real thin man, leaning against the bathtub with a thick white foam oozing from his nose and mouth onto his chest. His eyes were rolling back in his head, and I saw a needle sticking out from his arm just under a length of rope that was tied around his elbow. Meatball was going fucking berserk, teeth bared and growling into the dark room. I stepped into the room and turned the light on, and just like that, the man was gone, and the horrible gurgling along with it. I stood for a full minute in a cold sweat. I rationalized it. I shouldn't have, but I did. I had been driving for 2 days straight on no sleep and enough caffeine to kill a fifth grader. Of course, I was hallucinating. It would be weird if I wasn't hallucinating at that point, right? I drank a glass of somewhat clear water from the bathroom sink and crawled into bed. I normally don't let Meatball into the bed with me because he farts like a show pony, but tonight I made an exception. I think we both needed it. I was the big spoon to his little spoon, and I wrapped my arms around him and fell asleep. I woke up to a pinch on my belly, Meatball's nails scratching, and I looked over at the bedside alarm clock. 3:50 a.m. Meatball was under my covers around my torso, having a bad dream and scratching at my chest. I wrapped my arms around him and whispered to him to calm him down, when I heard a low growl from the corner near the door. I looked up to see Meatball standing near my bedside, teeth bared, snarling at the shape writhing around under my covers. My mouth went dry and veins flushed with ice water. I just now noticed how cold the mass under my covers was. I gathered my courage and lifted the bedsheet to see a ghoulish, pale white face looking back up at me. One of its cold, wet hands lay on my chest, its mouth frozen open, inhumanly wide, and a nightmarish scowl. The eye sockets were empty flaps of skin with red tears streaking down its face, and it made an awful sucking sound, gasping for air, as its other hand, with long, pale fingers, reached out from the dark covers towards my face. I fell backwards out of bed and rushed to turn the lamp on, and it was gone. That was enough. I packed all of our shit as fast as I could and went to the door. I unlocked it and latched the chain and pulled. I couldn't open it. The door seemed to be stuck in place as if locked from the outside. The TV turned itself on again. You don't want to spook them. This time it was playing a crocodile hunter-esque nature show. On the screen, a man dressed head to toe in khaki was holding a fistful of raw meat in his hand, just inches away from the face of Skinny, an angry-looking dog. They get real angry. If you spook them. The dog lunged at the meat and grabbed most of the man in khaki's hand along with it. The dog was ragdolling the man's hand, and at least one finger was shown to have dropped to the ground. The man in khaki stayed kneeling next to the dog, smiling into the camera with dead eyes. He was dripping with sweat. The power button on the TV didn't work. It wasn't even plugged in. I'm not sure why I thought the power button would work. The mute button did work. I took the sheet from my bed and placed it over the TV and went back to work on trying to get the door open. The door wouldn't budge. I picked up the desk chair and swung at the door. It didn't even dent. I swung again and again and again, and the door showed no signs of damage at all. I only stopped when I heard Meatball growling again. I turned around to see the sheet I had placed on top of the TV slowly slide off and into a heap on the floor. Then it slowly rose itself up from its center as if it was a 1950s Halloween ghost costume. Then the two sides of the sheet fanned out to create arms, and it took a step towards me, making that sucking sound the thing in my bed made. I picked up the desk chair and threw it through the motel room window and out into the parking lot. I grabbed Meatball, vaulted over the broken glass, cutting my hand in the process, and got us to my car. I fumbled around with my keys in my bloody hands like those fucking idiots in horror movies, but eventually got the car open, started it, and put it in reverse. As I accelerated backwards, I watched every door to every motel room open to reveal black figures standing in the doorways. They watched me silently. I saw the woman from the front desk wave to me as I peeled out of the parking lot. 2 days and 1 night. That's how long the rest of my drive to Atlanta should take. This morning I tried to Google the motel I stayed at to check the reviews, and I couldn't find any mention of it anywhere online. I couldn't even find a satellite image of it on Google Maps. If you're ever in need of a place to stay late at night, please make sure you check out the reviews online first. As for me, I'd rather spend the night camping.